أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 21. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وكذلك أعثرنا عليهم ليعلموا أن وعد الله حق وأن الساعة لا ريب فيها إذ يتنازعون بينهم أمرهم فقالوا ابنوا عليهم بنيانا ربهم أعلم بهم قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا. Thus we let them come upon them, or we made them aware of them, that they might know that the promise of God is true and that there is no doubt in the hour. As they were disputing among themselves about their matter, they said, build a building over them. Their Lord knows them best. Those who had the say in their matter said, we will set up a place of worship over them. Now this verse, because it has many pronouns, it could actually be explained in many different ways. The way which is more suitable for the context, inshallah, I will mention that explanation, returning the pronouns to proper places. Now, وَكَذَلِكَ أَعْثَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ means in the very strange way that we made them to sleep, in the very strange way that we made them rise and wake up. In that very strange way also, we made people to become aware of them by them going to the city, trying to buy something, showing their coin, and people realizing that the coin was something of a treasure or alike. In that very mysterious way, everything with regard to these people was mysterious. So in that very mysterious way that we made them to sleep and wake up, we made people to become aware of them as well, to come upon them, to come to their cave, because there were two different purposes in this sleep and waking up. One was for the people who slept themselves, and the other one was for the people. So we wanted people to come, they see the people, people see them, they become aware of each other. This is what we did. In that very mysterious way, we made people come. لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. To know that the promise of God is true and there is no doubt in the hour, in the resurrection. Usually the exegetes have made these two different sentences. To know that the promise of God is true and to know that the hour is haq, there is no doubt in it, to be explanation of each other. The promise of God, of course, is resurrection, is haq, and the resurrection hour is haq as well. So one explains other. However, looking into the story deeper, we understand that these two sentences refer to two different things. لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ, so that they know the promise of God is haq, refers to Ashab Al-Kahf, to the people who were sleeping. If you remember, I said they wanted to know how God fulfilled his promise that he would support his religion, he would support Jesus, and how Christianity is going to prevail over all that injustices and this oppression. Now, we made them wake up to know that. They saw. Now Christianity had prevailed. Now idolaters were weaker. Of course, idolatry was still there, but it was weak. It was not the religion of the state. Christianity was now the religion of the state. They saw with their own eyes how things change. So they realized, لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ. It's like, for example, when Prophet, peace be on him, when they were digging the ditch in Battle of Ahzab, and something happened. There was a very strong rock solid rock that they could not break. And Prophet came himself, and he actually tried to break it. And with every strike, some sort of a light came out. And the Prophet said, this was a promise for me that you will, for example, conquer Rome. You will conquer Persia. You will conquer Egypt. And people were very much amazed that, well, is Prophet serious? We are now surrounded, trying to build this ditch so that the kuffar do not come and kill us, and Prophet is promising us that we conquer Persia and other places. Now, if, for example, and it happened just less than 100 years, isn't it? Less than 100 years, Muslims could fulfill all these things. If someone was put to sleep at that time, one of the companions of the Prophet was put to sleep, and then after 100 years woke up, he would have seen, wow, this was the promise of the Prophet fulfilled, without anything that he could have imagined, the process of that which he could imagine. So, of course, with the case of Prophet, many of the companions actually lived to the time. That was the interesting thing, is that they lived to the time, and they saw the conquest of Persia, they saw the conquest of other places. Here, of course, it was more difficult. They were put to sleep for 300 years. They woke up. They saw how faith had prevailed everywhere. So, وَكَذَلِكَ أَعْثَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ, so that they know that the promise of God is true. And for us, of course, there's a lesson in this, and that is we should not judge things by the immediate time which is attached to them. We have to judge things historically. We have to see how in history always the tyrants, the oppressors, the people who bully others, they fall, they go, and what remains is actually the life of the people which carries on, and of course they are provided by Allah, and some of them have faith, some of them fail to have the faith. This is what goes beneath all these struggles and troubles, and they actually saw this. لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ, and this was great favor upon them, to strengthen their faith and to know that everything is in control of Allah. This is with regards to them. وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. For others, of course, these 7 did not have any doubt in resurrection and in Day of Judgment. People of the time had doubt about it, as we have in many traditions, that's just before they were awakened, there was a dispute, philosophical dispute, going in the city, or in the area, in the vicinity, about the Day of Judgment, whether God would resurrect the dead or not. You know, this has been a matter of dispute among Jews as well. Even some Jews nowadays, they do not believe that there is a resurrection day and the dead are going to be raised. And at that time, apparently, there was this sort of dispute, and we wanted to people know that it is possible. Because what makes us to somehow disbelieve in the Day of Judgment is the implausibility of the whole event. People who are dead, how are they going to be given life again? We gave life to them, and we made people aware of them so that they know that it is possible. Now, these people, of course, were put to sleep, but it didn't make any difference. It's just like dead, because ordinarily no one can sleep for 300 years. So it's just like death. And when they wake up, it is a proof that Allah has the power over everything. He can do whatever He wishes. So, وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا إِذْ يَتَنَازَعُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ أَمْرَهُمْ. This إِذْ يَتَنَازَعُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ أَمْرَهُمْ may refer to the previous sentence, so that they know that the hour, there is no doubt in the hour when they were disputing this issue among themselves. So they were disputing the matter of hour among themselves in the city, close to the cave, or in the area. We wanted them to know it. So with one incident, God actually hit different objectives. One for the Ashabul Kahf themselves, the other for people when they were disputing among themselves about this issue of resurrection. We made them to know that there is no doubt in it. Or we may say this is a different sentence, إِذْ يَتَنَازَعُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ أَمْرَهُم, when they were disputing among themselves the matter of these 7 people who were sleeping in the cave. How did this happen? Were they sleeping? Were they dead? How have they come back to life? How long did they stay there? So they were arguing these things. We made them to become aware of this. Now, after all this, we know that these people, they came to the city, or some of them came to the city, not all of them. One of them probably came to the city. People were aware of them. They came to the cave. They were staying in the cave, and then after a couple of days, they all passed away. Or maybe after a few hours, they all passed away. So it made the whole issue more perplexing. What was the reason? What was the cause for it? God made them sleep for 300 years. Then they were awakened. Then they died. And they didn't know whether now are they dead or they are sleeping. That was another issue for them. They didn't know what to do with them. Are they sleeping? Are they dead? What should we do with these people? What was the cause of that? So they started to say what to do with them now. After they died, they were saying what to do with them. Should we bury them? Shouldn't we bury them? Are they dead? Are they sleeping? So some of them said, just close the door of the cave the way it was and let them be there. We don't know what has happened. رَبُّهُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِهِمْ. God knows better what has happened to them. Are they dead? Are they sleeping? What is happening to them? So let's just close the door and قَالُوا ابْنُوا عَلَيْهِمْ بُنْيَانًا, and we build a memorial sort of building here and leave them as they are. However, the Christians, they actually now, for some reason, they were sure that these people are dead. They were saints. Because everyone had this story about them that these were the people who, because of their Christian faith, they had escaped from the king. They were here. And they said, no, we bury them. They are dead. It's quite clear that they are dead now. There's no pulse, nothing. And we will build a mosque over them, masjid. Of course, masjid, we say mosque, but masjid is a place of sajda to Allah, is a place of worship. So for them, at that time, masjid, of course, was a church. We build a masjid over them. And as I said, the interesting thing about this cave in Jordan is that there is a huge church upon the cave built in all days prior to Islam. So that is one other evidence which makes the cave in Jordan to be closer to the cave of the people of the Ashab al-Kahf. Now, قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم, those who had, of course, power, because we know at that time, of course, the power was in the hand of the Christians. In the city, the ruler was Christian, the emperor was Christian. So those who had power over their affair, they said, we will build a masjid over them and leave them. This is the end of the story. Now, so the story, if you remember, it began from the 7 young men who stood up in a very glorious session or party, and they stated their faith, and then they ran away, slept, woke up again, and the end of it is that they died, and they said, we will build a mosque, a masjid over them. Then, of course, there were disputes, because this story was very well known to the Christians of the area. And we know there are many Christians in the area, in vicinity of Hijaz, not in Medina, of course, because this is a Meccan surah. Vicinity in Hijaz, there were very many Christians in different areas, different villages. So the story was known, but the story was known in different ways. There were different versions of this story, with regards to their number, with regards to how many years they slept. So the disputes are now coming, because the mushrikun asked the Prophet about the story. The revelation came. Now, of course, after the revelation has come and the story is somehow uncovered for people, Then the Christians come and talk about it. Well, you know, in our tradition, there were 3 people, for example. In our tradition, there were 5 people. So these disputes are mentioned in the following verses. However, before that, one very interesting thing which has drawn the attention of some of the exegetes is this sentence, لَنَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا. We will build a mosque over them. Now, is it permissible to build a mosque over the grave of people? To build shrines for people who are dead, whether they are prophets, saints, or something? Now, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Kathir was the student of Ibn Taymiyyah. And Ibn Taymiyyah was probably the first person in Islam who started to say that we should not build shrines or places of worship beside the graves of prophets, beside the graves of saints. Now, here Ibn Kathir very mildly asks this question. He says that, who said this, we make a masjid over them? We don't know whether this was al-Muslimuna minhum, and by Muslimun means the Christians, of course, because this happened before Islam. Al-Muslimuna minhum, the Christians said we may build a mosque over them, a masjid over them, or the Mushrikun said we built a masjid over them. Well, first of all, this is very strange from Ibn Kathir, because masjid is never used in our terminology as a temple for worshipping idols. It's always used for sajda for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't have any trace of the usage of masjid for temple of idols. So what he says is very strange, that it may be the word of the mushrikun who said we built a masjid, and it may be the word of the Muslimun, of course, the Christians. However, what is clear is that those who said we built a masjid prevailed, and they were therefore people of influence. However, whether they did a right thing or wrong thing, when they were people of influence, means that they were Muslimun. Now, these Muslimun or Christians, they said we build a mosque over them. However, were they right in doing this or not? I don't know. Because فيه نظر, because the Prophet, peace be on him, have said لعن الله اليهود والنصارى. This hadith he mentions from Bukhari. لعن الله اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم وصالحيهم مساجد. May God curse Jews and Christians because they have adopted the graves of their prophets and their saints to be masjid. Now, here we have a sort of contradiction between the Quran and this tradition. If the tradition is, of course, explained in the way that Ibn Kathir has explained it. The Quran says those believers, because those who prevailed were the believers, those believers said that we build a mosque, a masjid, over their shrine. And then the Quran never says this was wrong, never says that the believers were wrong in their judgment that they built a mosque over the shrine of these saints, because they were saints by that time. However, we have a hadith which may contradict this, if the hadith is accurate, that the Jews and Christians adopted the grave of their prophets and saints to be masjid. Now, what does this mean? First of all, what did the Jews and Christians have done? We don't know, because this should be proved that the Jews and Christians did such a thing. I don't know if they have ever built shrines to worship their prophets. And secondly, taking the grave as a masjid means you do sajda to the grave. Now, what if you make a masjid beside the grave to worship God? Of course, that is not meant by the hadith if we want to say the hadith should be in conformity with the Quran. So the hadith doesn't have that indication that building a shrine, a masjid over the shrine of saints is wrong, except if you do sajda to those people, of course, to those who are dead. Now, you see, Ibn Kathir makes this very mildly, that we don't know who said this, and even if the Muslimun had said this, we don't know whether that was wrong or right because of this hadith. Now, when we pass through the time, we see that this idea becomes more rigid and rigid. And in the past century, after Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, we have this very, of course, honorable exegete, Jamaluddin Qasimi. He has somehow solidified this idea by saying that, yes, of course, this is shirk to build masjid beside the shrine of a saint or a prophet, because then we worship that prophet, we worship that saint. You shouldn't think that this is honoring them. It is dishonoring them because we disobey them. They have told us to worship God and worship them in place. However, there are lots of fallacies here. I mentioned some of the sentences that he says. He says that فَلَوْ سَجَدَ الْعَبْدُ لَهُمْ, therefore, by making a shrine over their masjid, over their shrines, over their graves, it means that you do sajda to them. Well, who does sajda? I mean, you go to the shrine of the Prophet or shrine of Amirul Mu'minin, you do sajda to them. Subhanallah, never anyone would do that. He says, if a person does sajda to them, أَوْ دَعَاهُمْ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, or calls them beside Allah, independent from Allah, أَوْ سَبَّحَهُمْ, or glorify them the way he glorifies Allah, وَطَافَ بِقُبُورِهِمْ, and goes round their shrines, and take masjid over them, and lights, and lit candles, such things. Now, what distance is between these? Worshipping them, doing sajda for them, or building a masjid beside their shrine and worshipping Allah? It's a great difference. But he has put all of them in one line. And then he says that وَأَثْبَتَ لَهُمْ خَصَائِصَ الرُّبُوبِيَّةِ, and establishes for them the qualities of Rabb. Okay, of course, it's wrong. Certainly it's wrong. وَنَزَّهُمْ عَنْ لَوَازِمِ الْعُبُودِيَّةِ, and takes them away from whatever makes them an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and declare or claim that this is to respect them. These people are very ignorant. Of course, yes. You see, there are several things in one line. If a person worships them or do sajda for them, of course it's wrong. If a person calls them beside God, thinking that they independently can do anything, it's wrong. If you do tasbih of them, it's wrong. However, if you build a masjid beside their shrine, why is it wrong? Why should we bring all these in one line? To confuse people. You see, it confuses people. If you say that building a mosque beside the shrine of a prophet or a saint is like worshipping them, it's wrong. So this, of course, has become rigidified here. However, the whole dispute is not between Shia and Sunni. The dispute is between Wahhabis and Muslims, because we have many other Muslims. I have one very long quotation here, I don't want to mention it, from one other Sunni exegete, who says that, well, all these things you say is wrong. Who worships them when they go to their shrine, for example? It is just to honor them. I mean, if you build a mosque or a shrine beside the grave of a spiritual person, by honoring them, you actually honor their idea, you honor their message. You try to somehow make yourself closer to what they said. So there's nothing wrong here. And we have this argument from Mudhari against them. As I said, this is not a dispute between Shia and Sunni. It's a dispute between Wahhabis and Muslims. And we know that there is lots of fallacies in this argument. Just let me continue what Ibn Kathir says here. Yeah, this is what I mentioned, that he mentions building a mosque beside a shrine means doing sajda to these people, means calling them beside God, means doing the tasbih. And this is a fallacy which unfortunately is somehow without any reason is being forced upon other Muslims. Now, do we have anything in the Quran which tells us we have to honor these people, these great people? Well, the first thing is what we have in Surah Al-Kahf. قَالَ الَّذِينَ غَلَبُوا عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِمْ لَنَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا. We build a mosque over them, over their shrines. And God doesn't say this was wrong. God doesn't say, if it was wrong, God should tell us that this act, after I have mentioned this very, very beautiful story, this is a story which takes you to spiritual realm. After I have mentioned them, and I mentioned they built a mosque over them, and I don't say that it was wrong. Well, this is very confusing for us, isn't it? It is very confusing. So God doesn't say it is wrong to build a mosque, a masjid over them. Secondly, when we go to Masjid al-Haram, we are obliged, not even advised, we are obliged. This is obligatory. God says, وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Where Ibrahim stood, you pray there. Now, we may say that, well, building a mosque or praying beside the shrine of a prophet or where a prophet stood, all these are shirk, but this one is an exception because Allah says. Well, it doesn't make sense, of course. If things should be somehow consistent, then if this is right, other things in the same vein is right. There is this hadith which is usually brought up when they try to say you shouldn't touch stones and these things. They say Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph, when he was touching Hajar al-Aswad, he said that, I know you are a stone and you do not benefit or harm. The only reason I'm touching you is because I saw the Prophet touched you. Okay, you saw the Prophet. That means there is some cause behind it, isn't it? Either we are actually criticizing the Prophet, that why Prophet touched you, there was no reason, and I know there was no reason, I just want to follow the Prophet. Or there was some reason in it. There is something. By touching Hajar al-Aswad, no one worships Hajar al-Aswad. If it was worshipping, the Prophet never would have done it. There should have been some reason behind it. And therefore, this very simplistic idea of shirk, that whatever you do in honoring, respecting spiritual people, spiritual places, is shirk, is a very simplistic idea. And any tradition which comes in this way, we have to compare it with the Quran to see whether it's actually conformed with what Quran teaches us or not. They say you shouldn't sit on a grave, you shouldn't stand on a grave. Well, the Quran says the opposite. وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتَ أَبَدًا وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Do not pray for any one of them, the munafiqeen who die, and do not stand on their grave because they are kuffar. It means if they are mu'minin, you should stand on their grave. If they are mu'minin, you pray for them, for example. So if we are somehow very rigidly want to make a rule, we have to be careful that it is not against the verses of the Quran. Especially, as I said, وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى is a very clear verse saying that you have to honor these great people, and by honoring them, you honor their faith. By honoring them, you honor their message. By honoring them, you gain a spirituality. I mean, what is the reason for praying in Maqam Ibrahim? It's because we gain something. And by gaining that something, Allah is giving us a spirituality, Allah is giving us His blessings, and therefore giving this sort of sweeping idea. Yes, of course, building shrines to go and worship the saints and worship the prophets is something which is quite against the Sharia and against religion. Ibn Kathir says at the end, it is very unjust of him, very unjust of him. He says, وَلِهَذَا, because of whatever I have said, لَمْ يَكُنِ الرَّافِضَ مُعَظِّمِينَ لَعَلِي. The Rafida, the Shias, are not honoring Ali. By doing what? بِدَعْوَاهُمُ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ, by claiming that Ali was God. وَالنُّبُوَّةِ, and by claiming that Ali was Prophet. أو الْإِسْمَةِ, and by claiming that Ali was Ma'asum. Well, what's the difference? Do you see what difference between these? Claiming that Ali was God and claiming that Ali was Ma'asum. Quite different. You see, this is injustice coming in, that Rafida claim that Ali was God because they claim Ali was Ma'asum, for example. This is not the way the arguments should go. Anyhow, let's go to the next verse. سَيَقُولُونَ, now the disputes come. Allah is actually alarming his prophets. Now that you have mentioned this story, be careful, be alarmed. There will be disputes because there are different versions of this story here and there, and people will talk about it. سَيَقُولُونَ ثَلَاثَةٌ رَابِعُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. They say there were three, and the fourth of them was their dog. وَيَقُولُونَ خَمْسَةٌ سَادِسُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. And they say there were five, and the sixth of them was their dog. رَجْمًا بِالْغَيْبِ. They are just throwing something at the unseen. They don't know. They just have heard something, and because they wanted the details, they have made their details. وَيَقُولُونَ سَبْعَةٌ. And some of them, in some versions of the story, they say there were seven. وَثَامِنُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. And I add that the Quran, Allah, I add that the eighth of them was their dog. It means that there were seven. So there are different versions of this story. People talk in different ways. There were three people, the fourth was their dog, five people, the sixth was their dog. But they say also seven, and I add, yes, they were seven, and this eighth of them was their dog. قُلْ رَبِّ أَعْلَمُ بِعِدَّتِهِمْ. Say, my Lord is more aware of their number. مَا يَعْلَمُهُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. Just no one knows them but a few. And those few were, as I said, a number of Christians who had the correct version. Whether they had the correct version just as a guess, or they had the correct version as it had come down to them in the history, we don't know, but only a few, very little, few number of people know them. فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. Do not dispute concerning them except for a seeming dispute. Now, here, because the kuffar of Quraysh had gone and asked the Jews, what do we ask if the story is right? And they somehow put it against the Prophet, and Prophet have mentioned the story. Now they wanted to dispute with the Prophet. Well, you said that they were, for example, seven, but you know the Christians say they were three, or the Christians say they were four. Now, the Quran says, do not dispute. This is not a big matter. فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ. Do not dispute in these matters, because always, you know, the Quran is not concerned about the details. The details should be read in the history. The Quran is telling us the story so that we learn something out of it. What importance is attached to it if there were three or five or seven? Do not dispute with them. إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. Mira'an zahira means just tell them, this is what is revealed to me. I don't know. I don't know about your history. This is what is revealed to me. I don't want to reject you. I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to say that you are lying. This is what is revealed to me. This is the mira'un zahir, a dispute which is very seeming, a dispute which is quite clear. Very clearly you mentioned this is revealed to me, and I do not want to dispute about it at all. وَلَا تَسْتَفْتَ فِيهِمْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. And do not go asking people about them, because the mushrikun may have come and told him, okay, let's go and ask that tribe of Christianity, or that group of people, or that scholar of that Christian scholar about them. Do not ask. Do not dispute. This is not important at all. This is a very, very trivial issue, knowing their numbers, and therefore just tell what is revealed to you. This is mira'un ظاهر. ولا تقولن لشيء إني فاعل ذلك غدا. And do not say about anything that I will do it tomorrow, إلا أن يشاء الله, unless God wishes. Now this is a very, very controversial verse. Inshallah, we leave it for next week. Okay. Inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi.
Thank you very much, Shaykh. We have some time for questions. Do we have any questions? We start with Riyazan.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaykum salam.
Very simple, the crypt idea of a church. When you go visit Rome, they take you in a crypt underneath the church. So it was common practice for them to either bury underneath the church after the church was built, or is this the precursor? That means, is this the first instance of the Christians actually meeting at a burial place of a holy person and thinking, okay, we need to now worship God, so we build a mosque and leave the qubur underneath the church. So I'm just trying to figure out which came first. Was it that they buried and then they built the church over it normally, like in Rome? Or is it that the church was built and then they built a crypt underneath it?
I think both of them. Well, initially the Christians were actually gathering in cemeteries because cemeteries were underground and it was a safe place. They were away from the soldiers, Roman soldiers. So they used to gather in cemeteries, first of all. And secondly, when you build a shrine or a mosque or a church over the grave of a saint, like, for example, St. Peter's, for example. Now, then you say, because, of course, Peter is here, and we revere Peter very much. We believe that Shamun al-Safa, or Simon Peter, was actually the wasi of Isa alayhi salam, and he's quite respectable for us, very honorable. He was a prophet, we believe, as well as Jesus was a prophet. Now, you say that Peter, of course, is here. Now, because Peter is here, we worship beside his grave because of his spirituality, because we want to have the blessings. I think this is what has happened. There's no shirk in it. I mean, when you seek blessing of something, when Allah says you go to Masjid al-Haram and pray there to seek my blessing, we don't say this is shirk. We don't want to go there, for example. Or going and visiting the Prophet and seeking his blessings. There's no shirk in this. Now, this has happened, and then, of course, when people die, they would like to be buried in a good place, isn't it? And then it becomes a graveyard as well. Like, for example, you have seen Mashhad. I mean, all the beneath are the qubur of mu'min. Or in Najaf, for example, you see it's both ways, A person, an honorable person dies, then the place is blessed by the person, and then people would like to be buried there, and it will become a graveyard.
Do you have any more questions?
Thank you, Sheikh. What I understand in the gist is that the people of the Kahf, when they were raised, then they were given the opportunity to, well, not all of them, but I think one only went to the community, and then, well, all of them, when the community members came to them, they saw them, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I understand now is that those people of the Kahf were given the opportunity after 300 years to sort of realize and be satisfied that what the beliefs were there at the time, 300 years ago, has now prevailed. And on the other side, the community also realized that what these 7 people were believing was right. Is that my interpretation correct?
Well, people already had converted to Christianity in their multitudes. And what happened was that there was a dispute about resurrection, whether the dead will be raised after they die or not. What the Quran says is that I want لَيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. We wanted to remove these doubts about resurrection from their hearts. Actually, in tradition from Ibn Abbas, we have that the king was actually somehow arranging sessions of debate because the issue had become very hot in the city, a very hot debate about resurrection. And maybe some of those idolaters still were having very good arguments against it. And in the report from Ibn Abbas is that the king really was asking for some evidence, some proof. And this was the proof. This was given to them as a proof that it is possible.
So, from your explanation, it seems that this was the main reason why the people of the caves were then raised to life again.
One of the reasons. The other reason was for themselves to know. لَيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ. They know that the promise of God is true. And the promise was that the faith will prevail. This is one, and the other one was about resurrection.
Thank you.
Alaykum salam.
The dog is mentioned in this story. The dog is mentioned in this story, and nowadays for us, we think the dog is an unclean animal, and we wouldn't generally have them around with us in, in a house, etc. Can you?
Well, even their dog was najis as well. But that doesn't mean that dog is a cursed animal or something like that. I mean, najasa is a different issue. I mean, blood is najis as well, but all of us need blood. You know that how precious blood is. But it's najis due to, of course, certain things that we don't know. And especially for shepherds, for looking after the herd, for guarding, for hunting. We know that in the Quran, we have about these hunting dogs that you teach them from God, what God has taught you. So najasa doesn't mean that they are cursed animals or bad animals or anything like that.
Assalamu alaikum. The comment you made about mixing up the truth and the falsehood, where you take 2 or 3 falsehoods and one truth and put it together. Isn't there a saying of Imam Ali alayhi salam on that falsehood never travels alone? This is the only way to.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's true. I mean, this is how people are confused, when we put 2 statements, one wrong, one right, and put them in one line and wanting to reject the right one with the help of the wrong one. The right one we reject with the help of the wrong one. Of course, this confuses the people.
So it's not so surprising. It's something that's very common today amongst people and politicians.
Yes. So you talk about politicians, everyone laughs, you see.
The leaders. Shaykh, while we're on the subject, Surah mentioned something about a movie that you might have written a script for about the cave. Would you like to tell us a bit more, because we're studying the subject? Is there anything there that we can learn about?
As I said, of course, before writing the script for the film, I wrote a novel about it, and the novel is translated into English. The Idols Will Fall, and the book is available at Stanmore. Yeah.
If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends to put us to sleep for 300 years, what do you think it would be like when we wake up?
Yeah, if Ashab al-Kahf could have imagined what they would see after 300 years, we could imagine as well. No, we don't know really. We don't really know. You just imagine if people 300 years ago were put to sleep and were to wake up now. What they saw was very, very strange. I mean, not only in terms of technology, in terms of values as well. I mean, if people after 300 years raise up and see that men marry in the church with each other, I mean, it's very, very amazing for them, isn't it? They think that the whole world has become upside down.
Do you want to comment similarly about the state of the Muslims 300 years from today?
What's this? How do I know? How do I know? No, we don't really know. If in 300 years the world still exists, we don't know. It would be rajman bil ghayb, just throwing at the unseen, isn't it?
We take a question from Mansoor, uncle.
Alaikum salam.
You mentioned about how they mix this building the masjid and places of where the saints etc. are buried, and the Wahhabi, they take it very, very seriously and very vehemently, and they enforce this. And so what is the reason that they are so strong on this, and even to the extent that they go on actively destroying places? Why have they taken this so seriously?
It is a very simple-minded idea about Tawheed, you know. I mean, if we want to really enforce that idea of Tawheed, the way they think about Tawheed, you should not take any medicine, you should not eat any food, because we give actually effects to these things, and they say nothing should be sought beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we want really to take it to extreme, this would be the effect. People should not ask anything from each other. So it's a very, as I said, simple-minded view about Tawheed, which has unfortunately prevailed now. It's a very extremist sort of view of Tawheed, which takes Tawheed out of its context.
Is this something which is giving the basis for this takfiri mentality, that if you don't believe this, then you are out completely, and enforcing it to that extent? Is this the basis of it?
Not only this one, of course, the takfiri view, I don't know how it has come about in Islam, because the takfiri sort of attitude was very ripe in Christianity. I mean, in Christianity, you know that there were inquisitions. They actually investigated and searched people's mind to see whether they conform with the dogma or not, and if they did not conform, they were excommunicated or killed or something like that. So this takfiri view was very widespread in Christianity. Now, how it has come to Islam, although we know at the beginning Muslims, of course, were very open, different views were being stated with regards to how we see Tawheed, how we look at different issues. Of course, we had this fitna of Khalq al-Quran in the beginning of 3rd century, end of 2nd century, that there were some people who believed that Quran is created, and some people who believed that Quran was eternal, because it's a speech of God, and a speech of God should be eternal, like God himself. And we know that, for example, at the time of Ma'mun al-Rashid, and after him, people were tried, put to prison, even killed because of their belief. And this was takfir. They say if you believe that Quran is created, you are kafir, for example. Or if you do not believe that Quran is created, you are kafir. So this takfir came from there. And So after Ibn Taymiyyah, it became somehow very emphasized with regards to certain issues, especially this issue of visiting the shrines and visiting the saints. But takfiri attitude, where it has come from, I think the root of it, the way we see it today, is Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. They said, we know that they killed thousands of Muslims for not believing in the same ideology as they did believe. So it needs more investigation to see how it has come about. But the root of it, the way we see it in modern times, is what the followers of Ibn Abdul Wahhab did at the time in killing people, destroying the shrines. You know, when they, for example, captured Karbala, several thousand people were killed and the shrines were destroyed and all these things. Medina, the same thing. So maybe it has come from that time, this very emphatic takfiri ideology.
Shaykh, it may be a semantic discussion, but why are we using the word Christianity that prevailed after 300 years? In Allah's eyes, there is no Christianity or Judaism. It's one religion, Islam. So
what should we say? Islam prevailed?
No, Allah's belief. I don't know.
فَلَا تُمَارَ فِيهِمْ. Do not dispute over this.
Just one interesting thing when he mentioned that is that the word masjid was used in this context.
Yeah.
Is that considered to be the correct word? Or from what he was saying, that should have been a church, maybe, because if it was Christians?
Yeah, it's certainly because this happened before Islam. We know that. The Prophet is reporting it. It happened before Islam. And if masjid is taken to be masjid that we know in Islam, of course, it's not wrong. It's wrong. It's not correct. So it should have been either a church or a synagogue or something like that.
So that's why I think he has a point to say that it would have been, if you build a mosque, then it might have been, you can call it Islam, I expect.
Yeah. Now, using masjid actually denotes one other thing, and that is God actually sees the view, the Christian view which was prevailing in the vicinity was correct, was a sort of faithful belief in Jesus Christ. That's why the word masjid is used here, probably.
Assalamu alaikum. Is it not true, I read in some arguments that, Isa alayhi salam used to do sajda, and the word masjid is a place where you do sajda. And so the early Christians used to do sajda, like we do sajda. Is that not the possibility?
Not only Christians, all the prophets, all religions have had this sajda. And we have in the Quran that prophets did sajda. And whenever the verses of God were read to them, they prostrated before God. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Actually, I think this question about why do we call it Christianity arises from the belief that every revealed religion has been Islam since the very beginning. So it has got corrupted over the ages, so God felt the need to send more prophets, but every revealed religion has been the same, exactly the same. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. The term Christianity was not used for all Christians everywhere in the world. For example, we know that in Arabia they call them Nasara or Nazarians, okay, because Jesus was from Nasara, or maybe the root of the term is something different. But they didn't call it Christianity. Even the Christians themselves at the beginning, they didn't have a name for their faith. We know that later on, when they wanted to refer themselves, The Romans called it, and also they themselves, when they wanted to refer to each other, they said, for example, that we have Christians there. So these names are actually invented by men. It's not a name given by God to these faiths or religions. Yeah.
If we have the final question from Safran.
Shaykh, on this point of sajda, there's a passage in the Bible where it says Jesus put his head on the ground and prayed.
Yes. As I said, it's very obvious.
And
all the prophets.
Jehovah's Witnesses sometimes visit. We actually asked them this question, and who was he praying to? And they don't have an answer, because you can't pray to himself if he's a God.
Yeah, of course. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Shaykh.